Center for African Studies.
The Africa Policy Journal.
Advancing the Policy Dialogue in Africa.
The MIT Africa Innovate Conference 2019.
Hello, my name is Meme Olawale with the Africa Policy Journal, and today I'm here to sit down and interview Olawale Rotimi Opeyemi, who's the CEO and founder of JR Farms, which has operations across the African continent. Olawale, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary, for inviting me here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I was hoping to start, if you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
That's interesting. Once again, thank you for having me here. My background is a little bit weird. I studied philosophy in school, my first degree and second degree in Nigeria. I wanted French, but eventually I got into philosophy because I realized I could learn French without necessarily going to school, maybe living in a Francophone country. But I've always loved agriculture. Growing up in rural part of Nigeria, southwest, Oyo State to be specific, I've always spent my holidays with my mom's brother, who's my uncle, who has a Gary factory. Gary is it's a staple, it's a local staple in Nigeria, consumed by over 80 million households on daily basis. So we've always spent holidays in the high school with him. So I learned how to make Gary. We're able to peel cassava. We're able to, press the cassava, sieve the cassava, see how the business goes. And also, we've had family friends who's had pig farms. We watched pig for them. We see how they feed the pigs. So I've always had interest in agriculture. And when I left school and I had my 1-year service, I had my master's, I started the journey in 2012 with advocacy because I realized that when I was reading, I realized that in the 70s and the 60s, agriculture actually created a lot of wealth for Nigeria and for Africa. I read about how agriculture employed almost half of the populace in Nigeria, well-paying employment. And then I read about how agriculture built universities like University of Ibadan, the first university in Nigeria, built from cocoa funds, cocoa exports. You have roads, a lot of roads, a lot of hospitals. You have TV stations, you have scholarships, all this coming from Agric. And so I realized that Agric did a lot in the 70s and the 60s for Nigeria and Africa. But fast forward to the 21st century, I can see a gap. So I started with advocacy that if Agric could do this in the 70s and the 60s, why are we not doing Agric now? Why is it that despite the fact that about 2/3 of the world's arable land is in Africa, we still have to import almost all we eat in Africa? So I started with advocacy, writing articles about how Agric did this and that in the 70s and the 60s, putting it on blogs, publishing in national dailies, and people started reaching out to me. International organizations started reaching out to me. Oh, we read your articles in the news on the blog. Can we talk to you more about agriculture in Africa? How can we advance the cause of agriculture in Africa? From there, I got on TV, Nigeria's leading TV channels TV. I got on Al Jazeera talking about youth employment through agriculture. And then fast forward to 2015, I was at African Development Bank annual meetings in Ivory Coast, where I met a lot of leading figures in agriculture, including the incumbent President Akinwumi Adesina, the then Vice President, Miss Cecilia Akintomide. A couple of them, they were really inspiring. I shared my vision with them that I really want to work in the agri sector to see how we can promote food security in Africa, create jobs in Africa, ensure we end hunger in Africa, and create wealth for the continent. Thereafter, I went for a workshop in Nairobi of African Development Bank, and thereafter I was lucky to get a major consultancy with the bank, where I was able to raise funds to start my first journey in agriculture. So we started with a farmers cooperative. The first attempt failed. The second one worked, and from there we moved on to Gary processing. And then later on, I thought of having a continental, landscape. Most times, of course, we were doing well with Gary production in Nigeria, but at some point, when I travel for conferences and people ask me, what do you produce? I tell them I produce Gary. And they're like, what's Gary? So you have to go on the internet and start searching, show them pictures, or even go with packages of Gary to show them. So I realized that I had to move out of Nigeria and also explore opportunities in other African countries. Then I was in between tea and coffee. After doing some research, I marked 3 countries: Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Kenya. So these 3 countries have tea, they have good coffee also. So then I had to read and see the government stabilities in these countries, the policies, starting businesses in this country. And Rwanda ranked highest amongst the 3. So I went to Rwanda, and here we are producing coffee from Rwanda. So I think that's just a rough background of how we started and how we got to where we are. We also did a little bit of cocoa trade in Ivory Coast for a couple of years before they have policy changes in the system, which makes it difficult for small players like us to play anyway. So I think that's just the background of where we're coming from and where we are now.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that background.
Thank you.
And if we could just dig a little bit on those policy points, because I find that really interesting.
Right.
Could you describe a little bit of the policy changes in the Ivory Coast that kind of changed the situation on the ground to
Right.
make it less amenable?
Right.
And then also some of the things that Rwanda does that really makes it a good space to be working, as opposed to kind of looking at Ethiopia and a couple of the other ones you were.
Right. So I'll start with Rwanda. The story of Rwanda is tremendously amazing. Having to see a country that went through the scourge of civil war or genocide, perhaps, which has been described as one of the worst in human history. And then a couple of years after, you see this country move from a deadly country to one of the most sought-after country in the world now. Rwanda has interesting policies that attracts investors. First, they have this policy around ease of doing business. So where we are now, we could register our business. We're in the United States now. We can register our business in Rwanda online, free of charge. You don't have to pay $1. You have to pay no money to register. So you register a company free of charge. In 6 hours, you get your registration certificate. In 6 hours, you have it in your email, and then you're good to go. So this policy alone, the ease of doing business policy in Rwanda, has encouraged a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of people want to start business to get the business registered. More also, almost all the system, the tax payment, the litigation system, everything is online, basically. So you don't have to go through the hurdle of, you need a lawyer, you have to go do some paperwork and all that. Everything is online, it's basic. And the system is really so much automated for you to interact with farmers. I know of a lot of apps in Rwanda, applications in Rwanda, where you can, interact with farmers, track the farmers, see where your product is. So the government has really put a lot of things in place policy-wise to ensure that business is easy in Rwanda. So that's why businesses, you see that everyone today is talking about Rwanda. I want to go to Rwanda. I want to go to Rwanda. Also, the government has worked on I think they have a couple of logistics policies that makes it easy for international businesses to operate in Rwanda. Rwanda is landlocked. They have no water. So they put up Rwanda here. That's a national carrier. And then they support businesses in Rwanda who do export by giving them very fair rate for export, and also removing export tax, or perhaps reducing export tax for people who are doing regular business. For us in Rwanda, for example, we have a very, very affordable export rate from Rwanda here. These are part of initiatives of the government of Rwanda to ensure that the environment is friendly for local investors and for foreign investors. And more also, you can apply for your residence in Rwanda online, get in a couple of weeks. So these are a couple of policies the government of Rwanda has put in place to make life easy for people who want to do business in Rwanda, whether you're Rwandan or you're a foreigner, right? And then come to Ivory Coast. The new cocoa policy in Ivory Coast, I think I'll call it, it's like a two-edged sword, right? It has the good side, it has the bad side. So now they have the farm gate price, which is good, because the farmers can now do well. So you know that XYZ amount is the minimum you can sell your cocoa. So that is good for the farmers, because now the farmers know that this is a farm gate price for my cocoa. And then I cannot sell below this, right? So it's good for the farmers. The farmers get fair pay. But the other one is that for you to get an export license in Ivory Coast now, the price is now very high. It's extremely high. So what you realize is you have the industry is now dominated by big players. So it doesn't encourage small players. Maybe my father or my friend's father has 10 acres of cocoa farm and he wants to export them to France or to Netherlands or somewhere in Europe. But because he doesn't have the money to get the export license, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to get export license. It's so much. It's so much. So I think that's a bad side of a policy. And I think that the government of Ivory Coast can review this to ensure that local players, particularly Ivorians, and maybe other Africans who are interested in cocoa trading, can also be able to secure the license and export. Because what this does is it improves their earnings. Because you earn more when you're able to export directly. If you have to sell to an exporter, then the exporter plays you down on price. So it's two ways. So they have the good side and the bad side of a policy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess one other question, especially looking at kind of this inter-African working, we've got different facilities across the continent. I'm wondering if the recently signed, CFTA, Continental Free Trade Agreement, whether or not that's changed, and if your plans, whether or not that affects you directly, or just your view on that.
Yeah. So to simplify it, we call it the Free Trade Agreement. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's one of the greatest developments in Africa in the recent time. Over 70% of trade in Europe is intra-Europe trade, right? You have people buy things from France to take it to Belgium. You have Belgium to UK, from UK to Sweden, Netherlands. That's the way it should be. Africa is self-sufficient. The idea of the free trade agreement, at the center of the free trade agreement, is to enable economic growth in Africa, so that what Rwanda has. What Rwanda needs and Ethiopia has, Ethiopia can export to Rwanda with reduced embargoes. For us, it's really beneficiary to us as a business, because, for example, in East Africa, if we have to export coffee by water, we either go to Tanzania or we go to Kenya. So now they are all on the free trade agreement. You don't have to pay taxes at the borders. You understand me? So because you pay your taxes in Rwanda, for example, you don't have to go to the Tanzania border and you pay taxes again, or maybe you go to Kenya, you pay taxes, and you get to the port, you pay. No. So, all these embargoes have been removed by this free trade agreement. The couple of countries in Africa that are yet to sign it is not good. Nigeria is yet to sign. It's not good. Fine, Nigeria coded security reasons, and then the president's decision to grow the local economy. Right. But we have to realize that Africa is local to us. Africa is local to every one of us. So when you're talking about local economy, you should be talking about African economy. Right. So it's a good development for us as a business. It's good. We're able to move commodities from one point to another, with particularly in countries that have signed the agreement. We're able to move commodities around without stress because of this. And I hope that countries that are yet to sign, like Nigeria, and I think South Africa signed already, maybe, they should sign it. It's very important for the future of Africa trade.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that really inspires people and makes people very interested in the work you're doing is not just the agricultural farming part of it, but
Right.
also the processing part of it. You know, you're doing value-added work. You're creating packaged full products
Right.
from the continent for export,
Right.
as opposed to sending them off somewhere else where the value is added and the benefits monetarily aren't always kept within the continent. So
Right.
I would love to talk a little bit about how you were able to achieve that. Often people say we can't do this kind of heavy industry in Africa because there's not stable power
Right.
or other things. How were you able to surmount that and actually get this going?
Well, that's an interesting question. Oftentimes when I travel, when I'm coming back home to Nigeria, say for example I'm in a Boeing 737, 200-seater capacity. If you have 200 passengers, 180 of them are non-Africans coming to Nigeria to do business. So I ask myself, why are these people coming? And then we have to leave. Then I realized that we have a lot of treasures in the country they're coming to tap into. If they could come and establish industry and make profit, then we should be able to put in place industries and make profit. So what I realized is you have to domesticate your challenges. You have to profile solutions that are relevant to what you're going through. Now, when we started our first Gary production in Africa, in Nigeria, we're running a generator. We're generating our electricity ourselves. It was really expensive. It was difficult to compete in the market because we were incurring a lot of cost. So afterwards, I looked at it and said, no, it can't keep going this way. And what did we do? The next set of machines were basically working with our electricity. We designed machines that would work with our electricity. So the machines have a small propeller that just needs a little bit of gas to work. So you have a liter or 2 liters of gas, you're able to work for 5-6 hours. So it's just about coming with innovations that solves the problem you face locally. Right. So we've been able to, sit down, look at the problem we face locally. Electricity is a major problem, not all over Africa. In Rwanda, for example, there's stable electricity in Rwanda. In a couple of countries in Ivory Coast, the electricity is highly stable. A lot of countries in Africa have gone through, or they overcame the energy challenge, except Nigeria anyway. So in Nigeria, of course, I think there's some level of improvement, right? But not so reliable for industries, So for Nigeria, it's simple. We're able to come and say, you know what, this is our problem, but we have to still produce. So what we do is just design machines with local engineers, design machines that have to work with our electricity. That's simple, and that's what I tell young people who are going to agribusiness or processing. I tell them, whatever you're doing, find a local solution to your problem. Yeah, we tried doing solar. We spoke with a couple of foreign solar guys, but the problem is it's not affordable. It's not affordable. So when I calculated what we used to put in place the solar plant for the factory, even if we're generating power ourselves, we're not going to spend that in a decade. Yeah. So we just look for local solutions to our problems, and there are problems everywhere. Or globally, there are problems. The key thing is just being innovative enough to look for solutions to your problems, and that's what we've been able to do. And we're keen about adding value to African product. For example, if you take a coffee bean, a specialty grade coffee bean, that's the green coffee bean. The raw material sells for maybe around $5 in Kigali, $4 to $5 in Kigali. And now if you sell it to the West at $5, or you sell it to China, or you sell it to Asia at $5, they take it to the country or to the continent, and then they roast it. It's out after roasting, and they sell for $10 or $12. So they make more money. For example, the cocoa industry, 70% of the world cocoa is produced by Ivory Coast and Ghana. And Africa only has 4% of the 110 billion chocolate industry. So you see, the cocoa industry is not worth up to 100 billion. But the chocolate industry is worth 110 billion US dollars, and Africa only has 4%. So the money is not in planting or farming or harvesting. The money is in value addition, and is in value addition you can employ people. You can solve unemployment challenges. You can make food available for your people, because when you have to export your raw materials and the finished product comes back to you, your people have to pay a premium to get it. So we are keen about processing, not to make money alone, to make profit, to create jobs, to ensure food security. Because if we produce this coffee in Africa, of course it's cheaper in Africa, right? If you go to ShopRite in Nigeria, for example, an imported coffee in ShopRite goes for around $10 for 250 grams. That's a lot. But for these, we sell these. This is $5 in Africa. So that's half of the price for imported coffee, and it's still specialty grade. It's premium coffee. Right, so we're keen about that, not to make profit alone, but to add value, to create jobs, and to make food, quality food, accessible to Africans.
No, awesome.
Yeah.
And I also like that you gave a little bit of advice to burgeoning agripreneurs. If there was someone on the continent, young, on the fence about what next step would be, what would you tell them if they're considering going into agriculture?
Oh, well, there are a lot of young people. I think it's important to note that first before I answer your question. The average age of a local farmer globally is around 55 to 60. Yeah, in the United States, in China, farmers are getting old. The same in Africa. But the interesting thing about Africa is a lot of young people are interested in going into agribusiness. A lot of young people you see online now, they own a farm, they own an agribusiness. So for me, I think that's a good development. And then for any young person, a lot of them go into it now. They reach out to me on social media. Oh, we want to learn this. We want to go into this. We need your mentorship. Of course, I reach out. I support them, giving them great advice on how to go about the project. For anyone going into agribusiness on the continent now, particularly young people, of course, what I tell them is fine. It's a good business. It's highly risky because there are a lot of risk associated with it, and we don't have so much of insurance for agribusiness yet in Africa, or let me say Nigeria. Some countries have some level of insurance for agribusiness in Africa, like Rwanda anyway. Yep. So I tell them you just have to be determined, you have to be focused, and you have to maintain quality. And you need a defined vision. It's not about going there to make money, but what value are you adding? What value are you adding? We're on the fair trade agreement. We are able to pay farmers good wages for their product. So with that, we know that we're not just selling coffee, and anybody buying coffee from us is not just buying coffee, but impacting the lives of the farmers. So you have to have a clear vision of what you want to do. You need to be ready to endure, because sometimes the environment is very tough. So you need a thick skin to endure the very tough environment. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I think one last question would be, looking at JR Farms, are there any upcoming projects you're looking to expand in any new countries, or explore any new types of plants?
Yeah. So we have a project coming up. Like I said, we have a continental vision, and we're moving very fast. Currently, we operate in Nigeria and registered in Rwanda, operate in Rwanda also. Next project is a very big one. It's happening in South Africa, South African region, Zambia to be specific. So last November last September, Zambian government has a feeding scheme sponsored by WFP, the World Food Program, where they feed over 2 million school children in Zambia. And the government of Zambia feels it's important to add gari. Gari is a Nigerian staple, a cassava staple anyway, to the national feeding scheme in Zambia. And they sent delegates to Ghana to learn about gari. So we saw in the news as a business, and voila, there's an opportunity. So we wrote to the Zambian government that, okay, as a business, we read news the Zambian delegates were in Ghana to learn about gari. I would like to take this opportunity up. And it's good. And we started the conversation last year. As we speak now, we have the template of the agreement with the Zambia National Cassava Farmers Association, which is supported by Zambian government. And we have an investment portfolio of $500,000 to flag the cassava Gary processing project in Zambia. In a couple of weeks, I'll be in Lusaka to sign the agreement. And also, the government is also supporting, through the Cassava Association, with some level of equity. The equity in land, training of farmers, also advertisement, because we're making a statement now on the continent, introducing a new meal from West Africa to South Africa. Right. So we're going to invest heavily also in the media to teach them how to eat Gary. You can eat it raw, you can put it cold water, you can make it with hot water. You can do protein with it, vegetables and all that. So we're going to be investing a lot in media, and the Zambian government is really, really keen and supportive about the project. So that's our next big project, to bring Gary from Nigeria and start Gary production in Zambia. That's our next big project for the year.
Awesome. Well, that sounds really exciting. Best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for taking time to chat today.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.